Thank you for zooming in to Tastefully Provocative, where we will discuss Black lives after the protests. Today, we welcome Kim McDaniel, Aisha Randolph, Miss Andrea, Kevin McDaniel, and Miss Christy. Thank you and welcome for zooming in. Today, we're going to focus on how do we heal ourselves. We've already, in previous discussions, we talked about institutionalized racism as well as changing the educational system. But as far as personal growth, what do you think are some topics or subtopics that we can begin to discuss to fix ourselves and move forward? Next week, we are talking about economic growth, which Kevin McDaniel will be somewhat hosting based on a book. So today we're going to focus more so on self, family, and whatever else we can do to mentally help ourselves and move ourselves forward. So what is the first thing you think we need to do as a culture? Welcome, Jason. He's still connecting. Hey, Jason. Okay. All right. So the focus on self is if we are not knowledgeable, how do we grow? I mean, we can always say, oh, I want to Google something to learn more about myself so I can teach my children. But, different age groups, I would say, would require different things. I mean, some people are knowledgeable, some people are unknowledgeable. Some people have little kids, some people, children are grown. So what are some things that we can do to enhance ourselves to say, okay, this is going to make me better, or this is going to be better for my culture, or these are some things that our culture really and truly needs to work on?
Well, I think this is Andrea. I think at the core you have to undergird our family structure. So I mean, we could read all we want about history, which is great, and read about what people have done before us, but just at your central core in your household, undergird that. So if you have a mother and a father and children, you know, how many people don't even eat together, don't spend time together, don't talk to one another, don't encourage one another. So I think just starting out in the home and shoring up the family structure that you have, regardless of whether it's a mother, your brothers, whatever it is, and branch out from there. Some people don't even know the roots of their own family. I don't know who those people are, but I do know that there are some people that have never left Patterson and have never gone to, say, North Carolina or South Carolina, wherever they're from, and don't know their extended family. So just starting out from the core and branching out and showing up the family structure that you have. And then when we come together, I mean, I believe you're a more confident person when you know who you are and where you fit in your own family. Then when you go out to other places, you're just more confident. So that's one thing I would say we need to do more of.
So you touched on a couple of things that talked about our history and how slavery has been a part of our inherited mental state. And one had to do with self esteem, how we see ourselves.
Right.
And the other thing you touched on was, I want to say, morals or family values. So I don't know by what standard. And I say this because, I mean, growing up personally, you know, we sat down and had dinner together. Everything stopped. No matter what you were doing, we had dinner together. Um, it was also reflected in our television shows, you know, whether it was um, uh, the Bill
Cosby
Cosby
Show.
Show, yeah,
Family
Mhm.
Matters.
Family
Mhm.
Matters, the one with Florida. Which one was that? James, come on, Florida.
JJ.
Oh,
Good times.
Good Times. There we go.
Oh, they were in Florida? Oh,
No,
Oh,
the
okay.
mother.
that was her name.
That was the mother.
Oh, oh. All right, no, they were in Chicago. Okay.
Mhm.
So I mean, even through the media, a reflection of morals or family values, I should say, uh, in the Black home was actually shared. And I can't think of a show right now that does that, that reinforces that.
Blackish. Blackish.
Blackish, okay.
Yeah, Blackish kind of is on the lines of a
Yeah.
family, of a Cosby Show kind of thing, but it's limited. I can't think of anything else that really does that type of thing on regular TV though.
Can you think of
I mean,
any
you got
family?
spin-offs, grownish, you got mixedish. They're all the same
Okay.
type of thing. But yeah,
Outside of that, can you think of any family shows? Black family shows?
No.
no. But see, I think outside of the show has to come with it the conversation. So I know when we were younger, we watched those things all the time, but we also had that those role models as well to go along with watching that to make that something
Right.
really out of the ordinary for us. But then you have a whole class of people who that's so far fetched. Even if they watch that, what is their takeaway? Is it just TV? Is it reality? Is it something they can aspire to be or whatever? So you have to also consider that aspect of things.
You're absolutely right. But here's the thing, that's the prompt. So if some of us don't see it, we don't have the conversation.
Right.
I mean, if
Right.
you think about when Cosby first came out, people ridiculed him and said that's not a realistic Black
Right.
family, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, and that had to do with us not being optimistic about our goal, personal goals, you know. I don't know.
Mhm.
Aisha, looks like you want to say something.
I was going to say, you have to think of it in terms of what it reflects to you. So people may have criticized the Cosby Show because that's not what their traditional family looked like. That's not, the values that their family held. And I think when we talk about Black families and values, we're going to run the gamut because not everybody believes the same thing. The point of getting everybody on the same page, I think in that respect or in the subject matter that we're speaking about, I don't know that that could happen because we have, so many different representations of what a family is, what their values are, what's important to them, how they raise their children. It's all over the place. So there's not one common value that we can attach to the Black family and say it goes for, all of the Black community.
But what I think more importantly than the TV show, because a TV show is a show. Um, at the base of this movement, Black Lives Matter, is in your home. Do you matter to the people around you, or are they so busy doing other things that you don't matter to one another? And it's not like, hey, you don't matter, I don't care, but do I take time to spend time with you, to talk to you, to pour into you as your mother, as your father, as your brother, as your sister. Because it doesn't matter if I matter to the White House, if I don't matter in my own house. What time are we spending with one another to build one another up? And when you have homes where you know that you matter, when you go out into the world, you walk differently and you hold yourself differently. So, regardless of whether you want to be a janitor or a doctor, whether you want to go to college or trade school, when you've had the upbringing where in your home you mattered, regardless of whether you have money or not. I think that's the basis of where we have to get to. Like, that's the minimum of what we need to start doing. If you can look at the faces of the children when you ride down, say, a Governor Street or North Main or whatever, and the kids are just out there and they look like they don't matter to the people, sometimes. And I hope I don't sound wrong for saying that, but you could just tell like they're not cared for the way that they need to be. They're not protected the way that they need to be. And we need to get to that as a minimum. We need to matter to ourselves.
How do you, so you're going back and we're invoking value because
But how is that how? I guess I'm not understanding because regardless of whether you believe what I believe, like if you don't believe the same way I believe, your kids should still matter to you. You
that's
know?
a value. Isn't that a
I
value?
think that they show, but I think that it's because they certain families, and I can just relate to when I was growing up, or even as I was raising my daughter. Certain families have different ways of showing how they care. So in one household, to call your child a bitch or whatever, that's how they communicate. And then you have another household where I would personally be like, that's ridiculous. But I think it's the way people show their love and the way they show expression. And I think that's the reason why now in elementary schools and other schools, we have social emotional learning where we're trying to teach children how to communicate and how to, emote empathy and things like that. Because in the home, it's done so differently, if done at all. Now it's something that they brought to the school system to try to do what the home should be doing. So it's the way people show their love and show their appreciation is so different. And I guess some people disagree with how that should be done, you know.
Well, I guess I could agree with that. I don't know. I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying. For some people, that's okay.
Right.
But I think that comes from a lack of knowledge, not necessarily a
Mm-hmm.
moral compass. I
Right.
believe it's a lack of knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and how that affects that person growing up. I
Mm-hmm.
believe
Like how
that's
they
just
were
a lack of
shown.
knowledge.
Yeah, like how they were shown. Like if your grandmother allowed you to run the street at 10 o'clock and you're 8 years old, then you may be the parent that allows your child to run the street at 10 o'clock and they're 8 years old. So it's something that's learned and taught and passed down, just like other things. So when you know better, you do better. But at what point are we holding people responsible for doing better?
So maybe like aside from church or mosque or religious centers, we could start out with just maybe like a family center and having family centers in communities, just informational for like fellowship, so you're not just like pointing down at people like, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, but just giving information, maybe showing uplifting positive movies, just different little things maybe you could do to in those communities where maybe they don't have the information or the knowledge of how it's
Mhm.
affecting their own community. We could start there.
So, like to introduce another way, a different scenario, a different perspective.
Different
If you
mindset.
have a
Yeah.
choice, because I know um, for my students in school, I try to always let them know that there's what I assume might be different from what they get at home. Here are some things, or here are some ideas, or here are some ways of saying things. Here's some ways of thinking about things. So you introduce. So it would be a good idea to maybe introduce some different options to people. I don't know how open to that adults may be. But I agree with you.
I mean, and that's a good point. That's why originally we were saying, how do you address it, because it's different age groups. It's one thing. It's easier to at least put it on the table when you're an educator. When you're an educator, unfortunately, you are doing far more. You're educating. You're not necessarily teaching what you're supposed to be teaching. You're teaching a bunch of social and emotional skills on top of, as a high school teacher,
Academic.
I'm not always just teaching literature, you
Mhm.
know. But the media seems to keep finding its way back into the discourse, because even Andrea is saying, well, even if we have a family center, if it's not religious based, then we should show some type of movie or
Create
so.
a dialogue around that movie somehow, like maybe, or a snippet, not a movie, because you can't really, and I'm going back to school, you can't really show the whole movie maybe, but if
Mhm.
we had a dialogue about the message or messages within that movie, and it was presented that way, and then you ran your discussion around that message, you would get everybody to open the floor to the perspectives and even some alternatives to some things maybe.
So how open do you think adults? So it's easier, I think, to address children, but how open do you think adults would be, and how would we get adults to come in or to
So there
introduce?
has to be incentive. So there has to be incentive for anybody. That's just a human nature. What's in it for me? So do we have dinner? Do we have, okay, we're starting like a monthly family night in your community. We're offering you dinner, drinks, light music, a movie, and discussion. And we go out in the community and ask them to come. We give them flyers saying we're having this movie night in your community. So, I mean, it's something that you could start and see what happens.
I,
I mean,
I
maybe we
would,
can ask for,
I like that. I like that. I think that also another avenue would be that if you target probably parents or mothers of young children hoping for better. Not, I mean, you're not gonna say, "Hey, you want a better life," not anything to
right.
do, but just you target them as in life skills, as in what are your hopes and dreams for your child or whatever. So because most people do want to get out of some of their situation if their situation isn't
Hmm.
good. It's not too many people that are saying, this is great, and they know they can't, make the bills and they, what I'm trying to say. But if you target those young parents, maybe even have something where the kids are over on this side and they're doing whatever they do, and the parents are you having a discussion about, what can you do to help your kids with their education, or what can you do to help, them with uniforms or whatever the issue might be, and then you throw in those other things as well. So if you get something that they may need to get from it, and you have a target group to start with, and I just pick the young kids because as you can see now, a lot of these young kids are telling their parents, the racist parents, that they're wrong because the kids have outgrown the parents in that avenue. So maybe, if you start there, that's the suggestion.
That sounds good too. Definitely. Younger parents.
I think the programs like that are good, and they would be able to help, the people that many of the people that come to those programs. Um, it's a start, and we definitely should have things like that in the community. When I think about questions like this, I think more on a larger scale. I
Mhm.
think that we as a people, and it would be difficult if not impossible, but we as a people have to decide first that we want to do better as a people,
Mm.
that we are a group. um, it's easy that we say the majority of the group is downtrodden and we have all these negative things against us, and we will align ourselves based upon our misery. But we haven't come together as of late to say that we want to get out of these problems and we want to be successful. And if we do want to be successful, we have to look at what are the things that we need in order to make our group successful. And we would, in examining that, we would have to look at what strategies led to positive outcomes and what is more likely to lead to a positive outcome. And this is where it becomes very sticky, because we are in the midst of mass confusion and mass chaos right now. And we all want to be individual, we all want to be separate, and none of us want to be told anything. So I'm not saying we should all follow some prescribed notion, but I think that we lack a baseline. And I think, and I could be wrong, and that's why I'm just talking in order to learn from other people. I think that groups have a baseline, and then they know that, okay, I know what the ideal situation is, I know what the baseline situation is, and I'm going to step out of it just a little bit because, I prefer to do this. Like, okay, my mom and dad were together, but, I make 80,000. I'm going to go ahead and be a single mom. I know what the baseline is. I'm stepping out of it, and I'm prepared for it. I'm not on welfare with 6 babies. You know what I mean? Because that's
right.
Doesn't have a baseline. I'm not saying no one can ever step out of the baseline, and I want to reiterate that I'm not saying that there's only one way. But when you have a baseline, you know what's more than likely going to lead to the better outcome, and you know when you're off it. Like I'm off. I don't drive at my left hand at 10 o'clock and my right hand at 2 o'clock. However, I know that 10 and 2 or 9 and 3 is a baseline. So if I'm in trouble, I can go back to what I know is best. But throughout my driving experience, I'm driving with one hand. But I know what the baseline is. We as a community don't want to accept any form of baseline. So you got a whole bunch of people living haphazardly, in my opinion. And I could be wrong, and I'm ready to learn.
Oh, no one's wrong. This is dialogue, and this is discussion to get people to think. I always have to remind everyone that, we're here throwing out suggestions, throwing out perspectives that more than one person sees. So, it's a complex topic. I mean, there's no one way of addressing any of this. All of these things are good ideas, because everybody's baseline, honestly, we probably wouldn't agree on the baseline.
Exactly. That's my point. Exactly. Right. And until then, it's my position that we will continue to fail. You need that, in my estimation, you need that in order to prosper, because how will you know when you're off? Without a baseline, I can do anything that I want. Anything. And you have to accept that. You being a member of my community and my race have to accept anything that I do. You can't point to anything and say, well, okay, you should have, maybe you should have did this, and this, because the last 97 people who did that, they had a positive outcome. No, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to do whatever.
But what I understand what you're saying. But if the whole issue is to solve specific problems so that the whole community can do better, that's the goal, right?
Right.
So if that's the goal, then it seems like since there's a disparity between what the issues are, maybe that's what needs to be tested, or maybe that's what needs to be surveyed, or that what needs to be approached to people to say, hey, is this your concern? Is that your concern? Or, are these things you need help with? So then once you get that information, that data will let you know, now we can address these concerns. The majority have this issue as a that they see. Because if, like you said earlier, somebody said if they don't recognize they have a problem, then they're not gonna, they're not gonna show up. So once you get people to recognize where they maybe have some downfalls or some problems or could use a little hand up or help, then the committee could go together towards solving some of those things.
I don't think it's about what the person recognizes as the problem. When you're thinking about societal things, the individual, and this is hard to swallow, but the individual is never greater than the whole. Never.
That's what I'm saying. You take the pieces of information, and then you use that information to decide where to start, because you're not going to ever get everything accomplished in one setting. So you take that information, you decide where to start. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I understand what he's saying.
When you first asked the question, Robin, like what is the main thing that we need to do? My answer was going to be we need to be unified, and I was like, well, of course we all know there needs to be unity, but that's the one thing in our community that we don't have. So it points exactly to what I think that was Ken saying, that we need to be unified. But how do you do that? Like, do you go to the White House and announce, okay, all Black people, we need to be unified? And I'm saying that it has to start somewhere. And so, since we can't all blanket the whole United States, what we would have to do, I believe, is start in community and like make it spread. So, in the community where we live, start talking to the parents. Just really aggressively going after the parents and doing just what you said. Like, okay, this is what we need to have. Do you want a better life for all of us? Because I believe more than what we think, more of us want the same thing. More of us want a better life than maybe the part that you see of people just hanging out shooting each other. There's a majority of us that want to do better, and we're all in the same predicament. How do we do better? What do we need to do? And it would have to, I feel anyway, I could be wrong, but I feel it has to be community wide first and then spread. So we shouldn't stay in the community, but like create a model and then spread it. If we could do it virtually, that would be great. But I think create a model and watch it change and then spread it. Talk to other leaders. Can you have your group or like connect with other people in other groups, and let's all see what we can do to, use this movement to be aggressive about it.
Okay, I mean, all three of you have overlapped each other as far as point of views and baselines. I'll say it that way. Christy is going more through an educational lens. Andrea is community, and Ken is talking about one of our biggest problems of individualism, because within our culture. So I mean, no, he's absolutely right. There's no way of conquering all. However, I do like the concept of the family community. I would like to go beyond parents, because there are young people who may not live with their parents that are in Patterson. If we talked about community, I would just go for the African American community.
Yeah.
Other communities do it, and for some reason we always, I don't know, it's a part of our cultural history. We feel competitive, or we feel there's some type of inferior within ourselves. Someone touched on self-esteem earlier. Um, you know, the only way we could get to a common ground and utilize it as a baseline is to get all those different levels, all those variations, all those variables together, start the conversation, and as Andrea said, let it grow into whatever it grows into. As long as we're growing together, I think that would probably be one of the best ways to start something. You know, I know we couldn't do it globally. You're absolutely right. But I do appreciate the mindset of starting within our own community, trying to get parents, young adults, adults, older adults, you know, why not leave people out? Just the African American community to have these hard discussions, complex discussions, understand that we have to agree to disagree, come with an open mind, learn from each other, to create a baseline. That's, I mean, you know, because values go in there, morals go in there, and it doesn't have to be religious based. It's just like, you know, what is right, what is wrong. You don't have to have a religious base to say, hey, this is right. Is it right to kill somebody? Is it right to spit in somebody's face? Is it right to, you know, yell out a racial slur? Like, these are all obvious answers, you know. So it doesn't have to be religious based, but starting within a community, I think, is a great idea at all levels. And utilizing education as usual, I think, is always productive. The only thing that annoys me the most is when Andrea, when you said give them an incentive. I guess because of how I was raised, there's no incentive. You wanna do better, or you don't want to do. That should be my incentive. I shouldn't have to give you Kool-Aid and peanut butter jelly sandwiches for you want to come out to do better.
That's true, but I feel like I'm gonna go to Ken, or I'm not sure who else is on the line, but Ken has his organization that he works with. I think it's the Brothers. Is that what it's called? So
Yeah,
he does things in the community. Like, you have them already, and I don't know how much. I think that's the thing. We have organizations and things already in place, like community organizations that can help people on the same level already. They already exist, but how do you get the people to come out and take advantage of what's already there for them? You should, I don't believe you should have to entice people to come out to do better for yourselves. But if they would
That's
have wanted to do it, they would have done it, I think.
that's why
You
my
know,
suggestion was. I'm sorry to cut you off.
oh, it's
Go
okay.
ahead.
No, I'm done. Go
Um, I,
ahead.
I was saying that's what my suggestion was, because I agree with Robin. I even in school, I don't like giving pencils and all that crap for you to do what you're supposed to do. So I feel like that's why you find out what the need is, and if the need is there and they want to have help, then they will come. I mean, I don't need you there just because you want to fill a seat and you don't have nothing to do on Tuesday night, or you want some chicken wings. I need you here because you feel a need and you see the gap that you have, and I'm here to help you. I can offer it to you. You know, I can lead you to water. I can't make you drink. So I feel like, that's why you find out what is needed, and then you address those people who say they need it, and you start
Right,
from there. Some people have
but
to be
you have the
accountable.
people. I feel like they don't feel like they need anything. They're super fine sitting 20 people on a porch, half dressed,
Mm,
drinking, and doing whatever. They are absolutely fine. They're
right, right.
unbothered. I'm
Mm.
bothered, but they're not.
Right.
Yeah. That's
So,
a mentality. That's a mentality. How do you change a
absolutely. How do you
mentality?
change? That is the absolute thing that needs to be changed, is the mindset of a people. Our people, the mindset of our people. And so, how do you change it if you don't give them information that, hey, maybe there's another way to do this. You know, we're
So
not saying you got to walk around suit and tied up, but there's a different way to carry yourself, and maybe you could get a different result.
how do you get
Well,
those people to come to the meeting?
I feel like it's the same way. The problem, as much of a believer as I am in Christ, the problem that I have with churches is everybody sitting inside and saying, "Come on in. Let's get from behind the four walls and go out and get the people." Like, how often do we go out on Governor and Carroll and say, "Hey guys, I have a program, I have an organization, I have something. I would really love for you to come. Hey, my name is such and such. I believe you can do better. I see better in you. How about you come? Here's a free ticket. We're going to have, something for you to eat and drink. Come on out." We got to go out and get them because they're not coming because they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing because they don't know. Some know, but I think the majority, because it's like from my generation on down, that's when we started having these kids so early. They've had friends as parents. They haven't had parents, so they don't know.
I think both sides of this discussion here are correct. We definitely should not have to give people a hook in order for them to come to something that's supposed to better them. However, reaching people where they are and understanding who we are talking about, um, you would have to do what Andrea is saying in order to get buy-in. They're going to want to have something.
well, I
Food.
think that if you have those people that want to come because they need to, because they know it and they recognize it, and even if that means 10 people come, and you start with those 10 people, then those 10 people will go out and they will go home and they will say, "I learned this," or "I saw this," or whatever, and they will spread that to the other 20 people sitting on a porch with them, and then maybe they can. My thing is make them come with a purpose, and if the purpose is just to eat, which we know we could fill some seats with some free food, but what happens when that free food runs out if they don't have a purpose other than free food? So I'm just saying, if you have them start with a purpose and they want to come for self, then they can be the ones that go back out and spread that. That's just my
And
viewpoint.
we'll have a much smaller, um,
Yeah,
sampling of. Yeah.
yeah. I'd rather have a small sample that gets something from it than a large sample that I just spent $500 feeding and then I, you know what I mean? I'm just saying I can start with
Well,
a small sample
that's
because if
true.
it's each one teach one, then
Both
let me
good.
teach this one and go back out.
Yeah, I think both are good. And you could even start one way, and if you decide you want to go another
Right,
way out,
right, exactly. You can do more than one thing.
but
Exactly.
both the thought are, I think, legitimate, and they both have merit on their own.
Hmm.
And we have to keep in mind, once again, we're talking about different levels. And when I say different levels, I mean different variables. So let's say I want to go to the meeting, but I want to learn about what we're going to discuss next week, economic growth. So I'm going to learn about the history and as well as how I can grow economically and Black economic wealth. Whereas someone with a smaller child is, their platform and their mindset is there for something else. So yeah, I appreciate, you know, the aspect of, Chrissy saying I would rather start with the few, the pure, the purposeful over the free food. But I do know for a fact, Andrea or Andrea, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Either way, it's
Yeah,
fine.
you will get more with the incentive or the food beyond the self-worth. And that is something that I just think as a culture we have to work on. We don't have the self-worth because we need the peanut butter jelly sandwich or the chicken or we need the
Right.
incentive.
You have a parent that's not, or a parent or somebody that's not going to come out because they're like, I got to cook because I got to go to work. So
Right.
I don't have time to go to that meeting. They don't have time to come because, that's somebody who is cooking or something. They don't have time to come because they're going to cook. But you just provide something. I'm saying have businesses buy in because, okay, we're having this. Could you donate this? I'm not saying come out of our pockets necessarily.
Mhm.
Have businesses in the community donate to and better the community for the betterment of the community.
I don't
I
think
believe
we're,
it's
I don't think we're even
talking
talking
about the
about the
cause.
money part. We're talking about
Right.
the fact that we should be worthy of ourselves to want to
Absolutely,
consider
but
ourselves.
I think that's the problem that we have. That's why we're on this phone call right now. If
Well,
it's like you're gonna be preaching to the choir.
Right.
can I
You're
ask
gonna be
a quick-
preaching to the people that already know it.
Well, what about the people who, I don't live in Patterson, but if you, let's say you have this group of people, and let's say most of us live in Patterson, and we know some people that we can reach out to, or we know some people we can ask that they specifically know who might benefit from some of the conversation or the knowledge that's going to be spread, then they invite, how about inviting those people? And they could tell two friends, and they could tell two friends, and in that way you have a purpose. And yeah, you can feed them or whatever, but at least you know those people, and you can start small, and then you could branch it out a little bit to more people. You understand what I'm saying? That to
Well,
me,
Yeah.
to me that would
it's
be for
specific.
like adults, but like for young people, especially the ones hanging on the street, they're not gonna. I don't know. I don't think they're gonna have incentive to come though. You
I
have
mean, that's when you
to.
start with the. You have to start. I think you have to start small. You have to start because we started New Family, and it was kind of like that whole game. Like you said, there are a lot of organizations that have already been started and already trying to do the same thing. So what can be and started that way? So what can be done differently to have different results?
That was Linda Galashaw. She said she couldn't get on. Um, uh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, but I'm gonna have to say goodbye. But I'll be
Yes.
on the next one, so just let me know.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks.
see you later.
Bye bye. I don't know how to get off. Okay, there we go.
Before somebody called me, you guys were talking, and you were still talking about that subject of the people wanting to come and questioning them about what they wanted I guess, out of life or how you could help them. Um, why would they want something from you if there's no baseline telling them that they're off? So,
So what do you say? Tell me how that would look. Like, how would that sound? How would that? How do you say, hey, you're off on this. You're not doing a good job at that. Come to this meeting. Like, how would
there's
that
no
sound versus?
there's no communal baseline telling them that what they're doing is off. You're the one that's off. You live a corny life. You don't go out. You're not in the club. You don't have a lot of dudes. You're not getting money. You're not with the drug dealer. You're the one you're a loser. You're a lame.
What is this meeting?
So, Ms. McDaniel, the question
Oh
started.
my goodness.
Well, the question was,
Oh, I don't
first
think
of
she
all,
understands
welcome.
the conversation. Yeah, I wasn't
I just
calling. I'm saying as if. I'm not calling that person that. That person is my little sister. So I'm saying as if. As
No,
if. You understand?
no, I understand what you're saying.
Calling any name.
Let's just bring Janice and Ms. McDaniel up to speed because they came in around the same time. So the first question we started with, we're continuing to talk about Black lives. We've already talked about institutionalized racism. We already talked about the educational system. So we were talking about self and how do we start to build our own culture. How do we bring our culture together with all of these, for lack of a better word, deficiencies, whether it's resistance, whether it's different value systems or lack thereof, whether it's how do we invite others to, and what Kim was talking about, formulate a baseline that we could agree upon and move forward and grow as a culture. So we addressed that there would be different variables naturally, because if someone is 25 and with kids, you know, they're coming from one perspective. A single parent is coming from another perspective.
Right.
A person my age is coming from another perspective. An older person is coming from another perspective. And we should not be leaving anybody out, because everyone can learn something and bring something to the table. So, you know, we talked about trying to create, as a suggestion, what did we say? A family
Trying to
day,
figure out how to get people to be collective and come together
right?
to.
So
Without,
you're talking about what you're trying to get to your common denominator.
right,
And Robin, you touched on it when you talked about culture. And I think when I came in, Christy was talking about maybe new family. The whole goal was to have unity, to bring people together. It has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do.
right.
But so is that what the focus of your meetings
So,
are?
you know, so the discussion is just to, what can we begin to do to bring us together, to educate us, to want to be better as a culture. And I don't know if it was Ken or Christy. Christy was going to use New Family, and I think you came on just about when she was about to start. And we talked about all these organizations in Patterson, but I don't think everyone has the same mission. And once again, I don't know all of the organizations in Patterson, but we did reference brothers and what they bring to the table. So,
So the goal is to change. I mean, do we all agree the goal is to, what can we do to change the mentalities that seem to be what keeps specifically Patterson in the state that it currently is? Is that the collective goal though of this
well,
conversation?
well, I wouldn't say Patterson. We're talking about our culture in general. I mean, we will use Patterson as an example because most of us,
Okay.
you know, live in Patterson. But no, we're just having the dialogue because we are the culture of people that remains divided. I mean, even in the Hispanic uh, population, even if they are not the same, if they're Costa Rican, Dominican, Puerto Rican, they will unify themselves for a particular purpose, whereas we are just
Well, you
known
said
not
for
to
a
do that.
particular purpose, but we're not talking a particular purpose. Like today in Patterson, Men Stand Up, the Brothers, and several other organizations got together on the corner of, what street was it?
Carol Street.
Carol and something. And then I was listening to them for a while when I was at the office. And then they left there and they went down to the other side of town, because the whole purpose is to address this violence that's going on. So they have a purpose, but we're talking something a lot more generalized.
Right.
And you bring people together sometimes around a purpose. But if you're talking something bigger in terms of being unified as a people, it's been tried. It takes a while to get something like that off the ground. And we in Patterson tend to like, well, maybe we as people, I don't know, but certainly it happens a lot in Patterson. This group crops up, and this group crops up, and this group crops up, and it becomes a little tiny group into itself. If the goal is to try to expand, you start small, you build your purpose and your focus, and then you bring more people on board. But we're talking about changing the mindset. And there's so many variables that will keep us from accomplishing that. If that's our whole goal, we need to do what's called in social work, partialize, and come up with a small focus and do that. And again, going back, I guess because it's what we know, when we started New Family, it was small. It was in the house. Then it went outside of that. And as it begins to pick up, or began to pick up, people end up with other interests. So of course, they move away, like Christy and what's her name, Christy, in Kevin's class, Tamar.
Tomorrow.
But the whole thing has to be bigger than the group. I think that's what I'm trying to get to. You have to have a focus. You have to have a purpose. You have to start small. Your goal can't be just that you want more unity or to develop your culture. You know in the background that that's what you're doing, but maybe you have a card game. Doesn't seem like that's much to bring people together, but during those card games, you discuss common goals. Do I make any sense to anybody?
Yes, we.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's why I think you start small and you pick something um, to focus on, and if you do want to kind of side swipe them by something like a card game or a movie night, and then you bring out a discussion from that, then you get the people talking. Then you say, okay, where can we go from there? And you get buy-in from that small group, and then I was saying that those people will go out and they'll tell two friends, hopefully, and they'll tell two friends, and maybe out of those two, one will listen, and then you go with that one and you spread it like that, and you slowly, you know, every little bit counts. Every mindset of everybody that can get to thinking or add helps. It's not going to be huge, but it has to start somewhere, and that's going to be small, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think we all. I think we agreed on that part already before
Mrs. McDaniel.
Mrs. McDaniel came in, as well as someone else came in. Oh, Janet. Yeah. No, we were kind of in conflict with the gimmick. If we want to help ourselves, why do we have to be gimmicky? Why do we need the incentive? The incentive should be, I want to do better. I want to be a better parent. I want to have, better economic growth. I want to be more knowledgeable of my culture. So I think I think we were just getting out of that when you came on. But yeah, definitely. The young lady earlier, Andrea, you know, she was talking about starting as a family community, um, and letting it grow from there, because we will not all have the same needs, or wants, because I don't have a small child, but that parent may need growth or some education in that sense. And I think we were kind of like negotiating over the baseline, getting them there, having the conversation, I guess agreeing on the baseline to be able, and then moving forward. Okay, so Aisha, I know Christy, right? Like, listen, I'm not saying anything new. I'm just like addressing a lot of the stuff that we addressed already. Janice, Aisha, Nikki, Jason, do you have anything to say? Patty, Kevin, anything you like to contribute? Because we're going on like 10 minutes before we end this session.
Hi everyone. I'm listening to the things that you guys were discussing that we've been saying for years. And then I guess the hardest part is that we all come from different experiences. We come from various family units, various dysfunctions and functionality, functions. We have to address our dysfunctions before we can really like move to be a community. I do agree it takes a village. I applaud all the community outreach and all of the the community, I guess I don't know how to say it exactly, but everything that's out there that's already helping. But how do we come together is always the biggest question. How do we come together without it being big I, little me? How do we get past who did this first or who's doing this next? It stems from that. How do we get connected? How do we heal within our own community? Hey, Benji. Within our own community to see what Andrea, Kim, Miss McDaniel, and Christy and everyone has said, So that's always the question. The solution, I guess, is what you've been discussing. Start there, start at a baseline and just keep going, I suppose. I'm not really sure. That's why I kind of haven't tuned in a lot, because it's a bigger question. And I feel like there's so much else that you have to address before you can get to a baseline. That's my opinion.
I would like for, I've been, I haven't been successful. I've been asking about the different organizations in Patterson, Black in particular, and I have just been very unsuccessful with follow through and responses until something happens. But I would like for my new family, men stand up. I don't know. Somebody text me about that today. I'm a man. And yeah, okay. So brothers, there was another one. But I would like if all the organizations could, even if we met at the Masonic Temple, begin hosting, whether it's like a monthly gathering, to educate our community just as a starting point. Like everybody, I know each organization. So this way, you're talking about the big I, the little me, who's more important, who started first, well, we're doing this already. Like if we can get out of that mindset and understand that all of the organizations have a mission that probably overlap each other, which are beneficial. I would really love for Patterson to somehow do that. And I know there are people on here who people actually respond to. If we could get something like that done, I would appreciate that.
So may I interject? You mentioned a lot of groups. And I said earlier that that's probably one of our problems. We talk about unity, and yet there are groups that exist. Why don't we join some of those groups? Why do we need to start another baseline?
Our base. So when we were talking about baseline earlier, we weren't talking about groups. We were talking about
The issue.
fundamentals. We were talking about morals and values of, someone had brought up loitering. People don't find anything wrong with sitting outside in packs of 10 and 15, drinking alcohol or, pants. Like some people are not affected by that. And we were talking about
we'd have.
So when we said baseline earlier, we were talking about what would be our baseline as far as educationally, as where are we starting from? Are we talking about home values? Are we talking about like what would be the baseline? And that's when Ken was basically saying everyone is going to have their own. So I think you kind of missed out on that conversation.
But that's true. I mean, everybody would have their own if you're talking that kind of thing. Like you mentioned, people sitting out in front of their homes. Some of that depends on what kind of home they have, which neighborhood they're living in, what their income is, whether they have a basement or an attic or a backyard or deck or patio. But I think when we talk about changing the culture, we may not be talking, we're not talking about that kind of thing. But there's also, you probably read it, some of you, there's a whole document that was generated by a group similar to this group. We did it online, right, Katie and KK? And there were about, how many, 15 people came up with the guidelines. Have you seen that, any of you who are on this?
Yes.
This,
KK shared
okay,
with all of us.
the guidelines. So that's something that maybe would be a jump off point, or if you think there are changes that are needed. But when I said organizations, you know, we in the community oftentimes complain about some of our traditional organizations. I'm not talking about the organizations that we may have, that I might have been involved with starting, but traditional organizations that we tend not to support, and we tend to find fault with, such as the NAACP, the National Council of Negro Women, numerous organizations of brothers. Why don't we try to become part of those organizations and help them to change, grow stronger, create documents and or goals that they want to take into the community. Since they are established, they may be able to help us to work with and through them to create some of those changes that we want. And change should always start with whom?
Ourselves.
Self. And we should look at what are some changes we may need to accomplish, and how can we make ourselves a better person, to be more understanding, to be more extending, and to help create those changes we want. I'm sure, Robin, you do that in your neighborhood. You seem like a person who probably knows your neighbors. I have to confess, I no longer know my neighbors, and I've been here for what, 30 plus years.
My neighbors
And that's
are
how
new.
change.
My neighbors are new, and I had to literally go out my way to get to know who they were, because they would act like they didn't know English. So when I was growing up, the neighborhood was diverse. It was Jewish, it was white, it was black, it was Turkish. Now one side of the street is black and the other side of the street is Hispanic. One family speaks English predominantly, but the last group that moved in would not speak to me, and began to speak to me after they learned that the other Spanish family speaks to me. So, I mean, yeah, we have those issues.
So the point is to change ourselves. And I started with me, extending myself like you did to your neighbors. But we're talking about Black people in particular.
Right.
And we're talking about helping to strengthen them. And probably most of us in this meeting, probably we are so-called middle-class Blacks, right? And we know of some changes that we would like to see. And if change starts with self, then making a commitment that we're going to do something to help change or impact someone else. But we're also going to infiltrate those already established organizations so that we can help them to get to the point where we want them to be.
Well, Mrs. McDaniel, that's actually, as far as the other organizations, we weren't putting down any organization, just to be clear. We were saying, or I was saying, I don't want to say we, I was saying I would like for every organization, every Black organization to be specific, in Patterson to host something, and I just use the Masonic Temple as just a general place. So one, we could learn about their organization. Two, be educated with their mission, if, help grow their membership, and maybe even grow their mission. But we cannot support each other if we do not know what they do. I mean, honestly, I get tired of people just coming to me for a $100 plate, and that's, you know, I'm just going to be honest with you, but that's not even really what I was talking about. But I mean, if we know of New Family, so let New Family host a meet and greet. Tell us what your history, how you started. Let people, you know, grow and join your organization. And then another week, or not another week, but another month, maybe the National Council of Negro Women um, host and let us know. I mean, I honestly, my mother was a part of that organization. Every time I ask about it, no one follows through with it as far as giving me the information. And I'm not going to
So,
put any names on blast, but you know, all I'm saying is we have these organizations already in place, as you said, and in order for us to begin some type of solidarity, some type of support system, some type of cultural growth, let's utilize the organizations that we have as a starting point and let them host monthly meetings. They don't, I'm not saying New Family would host every month, but like one month is, let's say January is New Family. February is National Council of Negro Women. January, February, March, I don't know,
but
March
why won't,
is NAACP. You know, that's all I was saying. How could we get
Robin?
more people who are outside of an organization? How could we learn if those organizations are not? I don't know. I don't know.
How about it sounds like there are several organizations. So
Right,
why wouldn't those organizations all first come together to not only explain what their mission is to the other organizations, but then maybe at that meeting or during that time, you guys could say, this is what the bigger problem is, and you can work together collectively with each organization to present something towards the public as far as outreach. And you're
right,
not 8 different organizations, you're working together on a mission that helps the community as a whole, instead of, oh, brothers looks better than this one. And I'm not saying that it happens like that. I'm just giving an example because I know how groups are. If you get into that AKA stuff and all that stuff, they become against one another in some ways. You know what I mean? If
right.
you could come together and you first start with that first meeting with everybody together, and you could present yourselves, and then you could decide on something that you could do together and go
You're
from there.
right. You're absolutely right. But you're absolutely 100% right. But you're also right about the other comment that we have conflicting.
And that's crazy, right?
Right.
That's it. Right, man.
So, with that being said, that is Janice. Did you want to say anything? Aisha, Patty, Kevin. I don't know if you're still cooking. Okay. Well, thank you for zooming in. I think that is a great start, and hopefully we'll get the ball rolling on somehow getting the organizations together and starting from there. Because I think that is a great starting point as far as talking about
Mhm.
cultural advancement, solidarity, educational growth,
Mhm.
economic empowerment that we're going to talk about next week. I hope everybody reads the book. Kevin,
Yeah,
what's the name of the book again, for those who don't know?
I recommended The Color of Money.
Color of money.
The
Yeah,
color
by
of money.
Mirza Baradaran.
Uh-oh.
Mirza Baradaran.
Is that on what? Amazon?
You could get it on Amazon and our audiobook on Amazon too. Kindle. some all kinds of locations. I saw that advertised.
Okay.
You said MRSA?
Yeah, MRSA, MEHR. I think it's something like that. Something.